Okay, we are on pages 128, 129, and 130 today, and what we're going to do is, as I read, I'm going to kind of skim through it. You're going to copy down some information in your notes. So this first thing we're going to learn about is the impact of geography in the New England colonies. So as you know, the New England colonies, they were further north, they had rocky soil, it was less fertile, their summers were short, all of that information. So what's the point? How does that impact what they could do? So if it's colder, they may not be able to grow as many crops. So let's see how the geography of that land impacted the New England colonies. So most early colonists in New England colonies lived on small family farms. There they grew wheat, oat, and peas. They also raised sheep and goats. But the rocky soils, as you read before, and cold climate made farming difficult. I'm going to circle that because that is very important information. So many families grew only enough food to feed themselves, and they had very little left over to sell or trade. So they were barely surviving. But look at this. Over time, this began to change. So let's see what the New England colonies were able to do over time. So first of all, they started fishing. I'm going to put an arrow by fishing. Fishing is a source of food for them. So it says the ocean waters near New England teemed with fish, especially cod. So they were able to have a lot of fish. I'm going to draw a quick picture of a fish to help me remember that the New England colonies had a lot of fish. Shipbuilding. New England's natural resources were perfect for shipbuilding. They had thick forests. Let's underline thick forests. And as we learned before, natural resources make finished products, so the natural resource of wood helped them build ships. And since they had those deep harbors, they were able to launch the ships into sea. So it says by the 1700s, shipbuilding had become a major industry in New England. Merchants and fishing companies in the other colonies bought their ships from New England. So it looks like they were supplying most of the ships. Okay, once again, I'm going to draw a quick little picture. Obviously, that's not what their ships look like, but there's a cute little sailboat. Okay, whaling. So what else did they have in their region? They had whaling. In colonial times, many products were made from whales, unfortunately. One of the most important was made from a whale's blubber, which is their fat. Gives you your context clue right there. The blubber could be boiled into big vats to make whale oil, which people burn in lamps for light. Okay, so it looks like this was very important. They used that oil for light because back then they did not have electricity. They couldn't just turn on their light bulb. So the demand for oil made it profitable, or money, got them money, for sailors to hunt the whales that swam in the cold waters near the northern England coast, the northern New England coast. So whaling helped bring them some oil. Here's a sad picture of a whale, and that helped them have light. So I'm actually going to write the word light too, because that seemed pretty important. And the last thing, trade. New England's rocky coastline resulted in lots of deep protected harbors that large ships could sail in and out of. So it looks like their deep harbors helped them. And so they developed ports here. Ports are where boats come in and out of to ship the resources and goods they produced to England and other colonies, and to receive goods they did not produce themselves. So remember, like we talked about in economics, you cannot produce everything in one area. So they were trading and shipping them so that they could get other resources that they could not make here because they did have those geographic limitations of being in the New England colonies. Okay, so for trade, I'm just going to put, there's part of America, and then, sure, there's England. So I'm going to put arrows between America and England, even though it doesn't look like that. Okay, we're going to skip this part. And let's look at the mid-Atlantic colonies, which we call the middle colonies. Write that word middle again. And I forgot to mention, make sure you fill these in on your note-taking guide. As I'm speaking, you can always just pause. Okay, the geography of the Mid-Atlantic or Middle region was excellent for agriculture. If you remember, agriculture is growing things. So many large farms sprang up here. Vegetables and fruits grew well in the rich soil and mild climate. So it seemed like this was a great place. So farmers also grew wheat, corn, barley, and other grains. In fact, the region became known as the breadbasket for the other colonies. So farmers in the middle colonies raised cattle, sheep, and pigs. And farmers and others also harvested lumber from their land. So if they had lumber, that means they probably had some good forests. Okay, our first thing that was impacted by their geography is they had busy markets and busy ports. So farmers sold their crops, lumber, and livestock at town and city markets. So they had markets in their area. And the largest of these markets were in Philadelphia and New York. So these port cities were centers of shipping and trade. So this is similar to the New England colonies where they had ports. Farmers throughout the region often shipped their goods on wide rivers to the port cities. So this is something that is similar. I'm going to put another little ship here. Okay, artisans and merchants. An artisan is someone who creates something that's artsy, and then a merchant is someone who sells something. So middle or mid-Atlantic colony cities bustled with shopkeepers and merchants. Blacksmiths, carpenters, and other skilled artisans made many useful products. Like I said before, they can't just go to the store, so they needed to make their tools. The cities attracted immigrants from many different countries. There was opportunity for almost everyone in the mid-Atlantic colonies. And I don't even know what to draw there, so I'll just put a money sign. Poor whites, blacks, and slaves. Poor laborers and enslaved African Americans lived here too. In cities, they did hard work on loading docks, in laundries, and as house servants. In rural areas, they worked on farms and plantations. So they had poor laborers and enslaved African Americans in this. So what I'm going to draw for our picture is a stick figure who is sad. Now you're going to skip this because you will answer questions on PLP instead. And make sure you enter this information into your note-taking guide, please. And we're going to finish up with the southern colonies. So the southern colonies is the most south, so that means that they have a warmer climate, but it also meant other things as well. Many Southerners lived on small family farms in the backcountry, so they had a lot of farming. However, large plantations were the backbone of the region's economy. So there's some non-literal language of a backbone. That just means that these plantations were what kind of supported the economy. Remember, the economy is basically the money system. And a plantation is basically like a giant farm. Okay. Plantations. Plantations were more like small villages than farms. Kitchens, workshops, and horse stables surrounded the plantation house. Cooks, nannies, and slaves who worked in the house lived nearby. Field workers usually lived farther away in small cabins. So they are like farms, they just have extra things, and their farms are usually gigantic. So let's go ahead and underline small villages and farms. And so it was like a community. So I will just draw a house. Labor. Now, unfortunately, for labor, it says planters needed lots of workers to run their plantations. The cost of hiring white laborers would have been very high. So instead, most plantation owners used slave labor. Plantation owners bought African slaves from slave traders as part of the Atlantic Triangle trade. And these people were basically forced into doing work. We don't get into that much in third grade, but most slaves worked in fields, planting, tending, and harvesting crops. Slaves also took care of livestock, cooked and cleaned, ran errands, and built structures on southern plantations. So these people did a lot of the work, especially the hard work on the farms and on the plantations. But they were moved to America without their consent. And the last thing is agriculture. What else happened in the southern colonies? Lots of agriculture. So they had rich soil, they had a damp climate, and that was perfect for growing cash crops. Just like Jamestown used tobacco, and that was their cash crop. They had rice, tobacco, and indigo. And the southern economy depended on agricultural trade. So many planters became wealthy, selling their crops to Europe and the other colonies. And remember, because they were making all this money, more people started investing in sending people over to America. Now let's look at this critical thinking real quick. It says the graph shows the percentage of southern slaveholders in the 1860 census. It says what percentage of southerners owned no slaves at all. So if you look, 75%, which is, if you remember from math, if we look, that is 3/4. 3/4 or 75% own no slaves at all. And then you can go ahead and finish this. And once you finish filling that out, I want you to answer the question, does this data surprise you? Why or why not? And then once you finish that, and make sure you have everything written in your notes, you do not have to do these unless your teacher tells you to. Your questions are on the next thing when you click begin.